Welcome to The Secret Truth. I'm George Butler. I have the proud distinction of having with me Judyth Vary Baker. Welcome to our program, Judyth Vary Baker.
Well, I'm happy to be here, George. Thank you.
I tell you what, this wouldn't be here, and I want to thank you for doing all you've done. And it's endless work, I know, in hours, but thank you very much for doing this today.
Well, it's a labor of love is what it's about.
Now we've got a really good crowd, and you've had some, how many speakers do we have up here?
35 altogether.
Oh my gosh, and some of the detail that they're getting into is just tremendous.
We've tried to put together the final verdict. That is, people should come away from here without having to debate anymore about generally what happened and who is to blame.
Right. I just earlier interviewed Beverly Oliver also, who was an eyewitness. So you have eyewitnesses here, and you have all kinds of other people. What have been some of the...
And we also have new witnesses that have never spoken before, like Shauna Willis and the granddaughter of Leander Perez's attorney, who was the big boss over there in the lower section, shall we say, near New Orleans, where big bosses got together and helped plan some very bad things, including they understood about the assassination.
Well, now, those are insights then that are new and very interesting. And we have people here coming in from all over the country, do we not?
Well, also from Australia. Scotland, England, Ireland.
Ireland?
Of course, London.
You're turning this into an international conference, Judyth.
Well, in Berlin and also Austria.
Really?
And, yes.
Oh my gosh, that is
Canada.
That's a beautiful thing because.
And Puerto Rico.
Well, you know, as much as revealing the truth about this, is this not a
one
teaching?
From South Africa too.
South Africa? I think a lady that works for John B. Wells is from there. So she's participating.
Well, I mean, these are people who have actually flown in. They're not just from those places, right? And we flew in people who have never spoken before.
Right.
And sometimes it wasn't easy. One brought a bodyguard.
Right. Oh, my gosh. So you view this as a teaching to teach our younger people the real power system and what went on and how they could attack someone like Lee Harvey Oswald and get away with it for years until people are waking up, though, because of your conference and other writings. Is that right?
Well, let's put it this way. There are fewer enemies because a lot of them are dying, and it's helped a lot.
Right.
And the goal is to, a new generation is arising, and they've been told nothing decent about even their own history. But what they need to know is how things happen. And honestly, there's too much evil that's been spread around, and they're too used to nefarious things. For example, however you feel, it's simply not right if you have an elected president to malign them before they even become president. I mean, when I was growing up, that was treasonous.
Yes.
And we don't have that respect. So people need to know where this happened. It started with a tremendous disrespect for President Kennedy, allowing him to be murdered in cold blood with a lot of help from his friends.
It looks like the same power group that did the JFK assassination, several of that same networking is still in place, is it not?
Of course it is. Now, what's nice is a lot of them are in wheelchairs. And let's face it, bad people often attract clever and intelligent people, but not as often as good people do. I mean, that's what's on our side.
Right.
There are a lot of stupid people who are bad. Why? Because they've had to try to use other means. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of wonderful, stupid people who are good. But what I'm trying to say, it's easy to get somebody to do evil and they don't recognize the bad that they're doing, the evil, because they're not maybe that
bright. People are in a
bright.
state of ignorance at times, are they not? And they just keep thinking the old and keep and tried things, huh? They always run out books every 2 or 3 years about Lee Harvey Oswald being the sole assassin. I mean, I can't believe they must pay those people thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Well, it isn't working anymore, George. Huh? I mean, if it were now it's true I still have to live overseas, and I've been doing that since 2007 because then I don't end up in the hospital anymore.
Right.
So, that's important to me. But as we go along, what they're doing is they're actually assassinating President Kennedy again. They're after his character.
Oh, I see. They're reiterating it.
That's right. Then you don't
and just
care if he died.
reinforcing the lie and
That's right.
the false. So this fake news is that, and the reiteration then from the mainline entity.
Well, the other thing that goes on is they actually insert ridiculous theories like Jackie Kennedy killed her husband. So therefore, let's face it, the actual occurrence of the assassination does have some spectacular and very interesting aspects to it, to the point that it sounds almost unreal. Like a headline that says the Mafia and the CIA and the FBI and all these people all killed, oil people, banks, they all killed Kennedy, and yet that actually turns out to be true in its own, we'll just generalize it like that. But here we have people hearing, the Secret Service agent accidentally killed Kennedy. And they're coming up with all these odd things so that you don't focus on what's so plain and simple and easy to see now. It's just simply Lyndon Johnson plus a whole bunch of others who got together. And it's just like they did when we talk about Caesar. Think about how Julius Caesar was assassinated. Who did it, George? Who assassinated Caesar?
Brutus, I guess.
There we go. That's our lone. That's our lone dagger man.
He too, Brutus.
But
there was a gang there, right?
Yes, and see,
Right.
actually a bunch of senators.
Right.
And we don't have their names. Well, this is Lee Oswald taking the blame for a bunch of senators, you might say.
Oh my gosh.
You see?
Yeah. Right.
They're using the same old pattern. It's as old as time.
Yeah, and early on, working in New Orleans, you began to understand, did you, as a young lady working in the lab and working lab work and research, you began to understand at the beginnings of something more sinister, did you not, or not? Did that occur to you much
Well,
in the early age? Or not?
what happened to me, it was peculiar. It's in the newspapers. I was actually assigned to do research on making cancer more deadly.
Yes.
Now, I didn't realize that as I was an asset in a way that I was untraceable because I didn't have my doctor's degree.
Right.
And it was easy to discard me if things went wrong or if they didn't like me. I didn't understand it. I thought, oh wow, I get steak dinners. Everybody's saying, you're smart. You got the
You were
IQ.
young and vibrant,
and I trusted them. I trusted the voices of authority. I believed
Yes.
all the stories about patriotism. So when I looked at Alton Ochsner, for example, I saw a very patriotic, anti-Castro, anti-communist man, not realizing he was also eugenicist and racist and some other problems. Now, don't get me wrong, he did some very good work. And even he refused to take large amounts of money that he got from principals such as Murchison and others who were actually involved. I mean, he had his standards, but the standards included doing whatever was necessary in order to have his version of democracy and freedom propagated, and that didn't include the kind of people like John F. Kennedy's version.
Right. Lee Harvey Oswald, did he thwart the Chicago attempt at JFK? Is there?
I am happy to say that in 1999, when I told 60 Minutes, that Lee told me, he said this, I'm trying to quote, "I believe I saved Kennedy's life about 3 weeks ago." Now, they said, well, wait, we can believe that Lee was framed, we can believe that he was clueless, we can believe that he was an unfortunate, little baby that just got caught in a storm, but we cannot believe that he was actively trying to save Kennedy's life. That would be so hard for anyone to believe, Judyth. And here I had lots of evidence files, I had my witnesses, but they tried, 3 times to film. And over 14 months, and in other words, they believed me in the end because I had so much information. But here we have this situation where Lee Oswald is, he's being turned into some clueless. It wasn't like that. And I'd like to show you the background for that. David W. Ferrie, and I've written the book, David Ferrie, Mafia Pilot. David Ferrie is always being portrayed as hating John F. Kennedy. Now, they were both Irish Catholics. We have records that David Ferrie voted for Kennedy. But then came along July of '61, and you have the Bay of Pigs fiasco. And here you have David Ferrie, who had been working with insurgents and young men, and he had emotional attachments as a homosexual to a lot of them that he worked with. We know that at least one of his pilots, he claimed, was shot down and killed, and that at least one other of his associates, young men, was put in a metal box along with others, and when they finally opened it up after hauling it around, they were all boiled to death, like inside for the heat. And he just hated Castro because of that. Hated him. And now, then he hated Kennedy, see, because Kennedy took the blame. Now, there's an interesting thing that happened. We have John F. Kennedy taking, he's hating Kennedy. He is being invited. David Ferrie, a gifted speaker, to the point that this group, a brand new organization of retired military officers, got together and they want this gifted man to speak to them. He can speak Spanish and all kinds of languages. He's educated, erudite. He's a great pilot, and he's anti-Castro, so on. And he gets up there and says, somebody's going to shoot him from behind the bush, and that's fine with me. And they say, get off the stage.
Really? God.
Well, now here's what happened.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, after that horrendous outburst, you'd think that his career would be... They actually came, he said about half of them actually surrounded him after it was all over and said, do you know something? We feel the same way. And some of them were from Texas, some were from Georgia and Louisiana, and all the way over to Florida and so on, from Eglin Air Force Base. Now, what have you got going here? A gifted pilot, someone who speaks Spanish. They said, we can actually use you because you have this route all the time you're using with Eastern Airlines, and you can get mail, or in other words, our messages actually to like Houston and everything faster than
My gosh.
than postal service could. And here's the point. David Ferrie finds out that actually it wasn't Kennedy's fault. He took the blame. As he watches Dulles get canned, he sees that Charles Cabell is fired and disgraced. And of course, Earl Cabell, being the mayor of Dallas, he's willing to set up anything in Dallas.
Right.
You have the situation where they realize, David Ferrie realizes that if he keeps saying he hates Kennedy, he's going to learn a lot. Now he's changed his mind. This is what people don't know, and I did because I knew him. So he's in a situation where he's getting information. Lee Oswald said to me, clearly, he said, I gave an oath as a Marine to serve and obey my president. He said, I can't obey a dead president. I mean, he would talk like that, very logically. So he really volunteered to get into this. And of course, they trapped him. And I'm sure they lured him in many ways. And he did it because he tried to save the president. And then we look at Chicago. We have Mary Sherman's connections to Chicago. We have Jack Ruby's. And if you read my book, you'll see Jack Ruby did not want to kill Lee Oswald. But that's why you hear a phone call coming in and all that. That sounds like Ruby's voice, and it was. So David Ferrie is in a situation, and he has enough contacts all over the place, and all this information coming in. He's relaying it to Lee Oswald, who is making himself willing to penetrate. He thinks he's probably infiltrating. I don't know how much, but I know that by Sunday, the day of the telex, and by the way, he did send that telex. It says it's from Hoover, but Hoover doesn't spell assassinate, assassinate, and all the other misspellings.
Man.
Just because it says it's from Hoover doesn't mean it was. Lee could memorize things like crazy, and he knew all the different telex numbers. In fact, I saw those telex numbers because Guy Bannister had a telex. Not everybody had one. Bannister had one, and he had a list there of telex numbers to New Orleans and so on. So they had a system going there. I'm mentioning this because we have a telex that comes on Sunday. And they're trying to, we now know that, I think it was Wilson or Wilcox Watson, whatever their name was, the husband and wife team anyway, they saved that telex, and they said it went all over, but no, just because it said it went all over doesn't mean that Lee was able to send it everywhere. He sent it certain places.
To certain people.
That's
key
right.
people, maybe.
Like to, well, from certainly Texas got one. I mean, Dallas
Thought
probably.
it might do some good.
Well, he knew where this was probably going to happen.
I see.
Now, a couple weeks earlier, see, something happened in Chicago.
Right.
And we know that Abraham Bolden, now in 1999, that's when I told everybody that Lee told me
Okay.
that he's got, he believed he saved Kennedy's life a few weeks earlier. And of course, I was probably laughed out of the house. So I was being interviewed like you're doing right now. But here's what happened. A few years later, Abraham Bolden speaks up and he talks to Jim Douglas, and he explains that he was there in Chicago when FBI called him and said, stand down, you're not going to be able to do anything to protect Kennedy. He's not coming. And he's not coming because a plot has been exposed to kill Kennedy, and we've done some arrests and so on. And the name of the informant that told them the information that resulted in this saving Kennedy's life, literally, his name was Lee. And that thrilled me so much because I realized at last somebody came forth.
Well, that's great, isn't it?
Yes.
It takes time, though, for people to come forward, doesn't it?
Well, Abraham.
But you're sort of a center, a nexus for people coming through to you and disclosing and helping you.
Oh, they have.
They've just you're a center of a nexus of truth, and they're wanting to tell you things, aren't they?
Well, I love people, and it's peculiar what happens. It's like in 5 minutes, they will die for me. I will die for them. Maybe that's why.
I saw you hugging Jim Hetzer and all these people. They do have. A
I love
affection
them,
for
and
you.
I think they feel it.
It's a camaraderie. It's a colleagues. It's a esprit de corps or something, isn't it?
It's a feeling that just comes up in your heart because you know you're doing the right thing, and these people are with you.
We're all working together.
Yes,
for the truth
George,
to try
yes.
to help this country survive in the world too.
And
Not just this
there's no
country.
reason why we can't love each other and be kind to each other while
That's
we're trying
right.
to get these facts.
Exactly.
So one of the things I think the reason the conference has gotten doubled every year in size like it has, what I think we're looking at is people realize that you can learn ugly and horrible things, but that you can come away feeling that maybe you can do something about it.
Yes, that's right. An
see?
empowerment feeling too.
And many people have confided things and then realize I don't tell. Now I don't tell because I waited 35 years before speaking
Well, look
about
at what
Lee.
all you've done in getting this re-examined, you could say, and a new interest. I think that's what
Well,
you've done.
bless your heart,
You've
George.
created a new interest in this for sure. And
Well,
you're-
the fact
it's
is
headed
I
the
was
right
there.
way.
I loved him, and
Right,
the power of love is stronger than the power of hate.
It was a love and a romance in New
Yes.
Orleans, and a very, very beautiful place. And I know he really loved you as much as you loved him.
I have a few adversaries. There's a David Lifton who would like to wish I went away.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. Before I spoke out, he said something very interesting. I presented that today as one of my quotes, because he said, "Why is it that Marina Oswald, she wasn't abused when she was in the USSR with Lee, but then they come to America, there's adjustment problems and everything, and there's slapping and hitting going on, and one really bad incident." And he said, but suddenly, she moves to New Orleans and nothing happens anymore. No more hitting, no more anything, And he said, and that extends for the rest of Lee Oswald's life. What happened?
Right.
And he says, you tell me if you can find one incident. Well, George, when we started falling in love, when he actually confessed to me how he lost his temper with Marina, I said, you lay a hand on her and it's over. And he never touched her again.
I'd say. Well,
And
it's a
this
very
peace, I
poignant-
want to have a
It's a very
peace.
poignant experience, moment, wasn't it?
So the peace and love is, I always just want to help people.
Right.
I wanted to cure cancer. And as for Lee, he only wanted to be a good Marine, just like Garrison said.
Right. Well, y'all spent a lot of time in the nice cafes. We went there one year for our birthday.
Yeah.
And it took you back, and you released these lanterns.
Yes.
And you know what? One of them got involved, and Randall was with me that night, my cameraman here and assistant, and it got involved in some power lines across the street, and it finally broke loose and sailed out over the Mississippi.
Yeah, that
so
was
it did.
neat.
It got up there like you wanted, but it took a while, a few minutes.
Well, then
but
maybe
it was
these take a
beautiful
while.
thing, though, that you released those things, and I want to thank you for.
Well, I've got one more thing to tell you.
Sure, what?
And that it has to do with that. Interestingly enough, now I could go around the corner and get lost. And
Okay.
Marcella made fun of me because I couldn't find my way out of a paper sack. It's
Okay.
in the book, Me and Lee. And I've written all this down. And here, recently the National Archives have begun releasing some of these new things. They're coming out little by little, not all at once, you see.
Okay.
So you need to know that. And one of them that's come out is about Charlie's Restaurant and Bar. That was on 640 Carondelet. That's important because we were working at 640 on Magazine Street at Riley's. Now, I couldn't get lost going from one 640 to the other. It was a straight shot. So what happened is every night we didn't ride home from Riley's with everybody else watching us. We'd wait an hour or so we'd be all by ourselves and we could cuddle or, sit it together on the bus and nobody would notice. So what we did, we'd meet at Charlie's. And I've never mentioned it before because I couldn't remember whether it was bar and restaurant or restaurant and bar, and I didn't want to get it wrong.
Right.
Well, here it is in the archives as restaurant and bar. So here's a deaf mute. He can't talk. He writes on napkins, but he's a well-dressed and a sensible person, and they describe him as being in there all the time. He said he wrote that he had testified, you might say, to everyone as he could. FBI wrote it down, never met him, but he said that he saw Lee Oswald at Charlie's all the time around 5 or 5:30, you see, with a girl. And now, all the time when we met, at least several times we would say, well, what library we're going to meet at. We always met on Thursdays. They say, why did Lee Oswald go on Thursdays to the library at Napoleon Street when he always went on Saturdays just a few days later with his wife?
Right. Okay.
See, well, that's because we always met there on Thursday. But we might meet at a different library. So this deaf mute thought I was working in a library, see, because of that, because he's reading lips.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this new little piece of evidence has come out, and it's kind of fun because,
It is.
and so every year something comes out like that.
It takes years sometimes for things like that to just spring forth, doesn't it? Huh?
So anyway, Lee and I love to be together, and here's a little record of it,
Well, that's great. Well, any final thoughts, Judyth Vary Baker?
Well, I'm just grateful that we've had a nice interview. I'm always so busy, and when you come to conferences, it seems I've been surrounded by people, and we just couldn't do this, and you've been very patient, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you.
Thank you for being with us this evening, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Okay?
Well, God bless you all.
God bless you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.